Welcome to the Backlash at Backlash.com. My name is Rod Van Mecklin, and in this video I'm going to read from my 1992 article, Aggression. Why are men so much more aggressive than women? The footnoted article is linked below. 1992, Bellevue, Washington. Quote, supposedly, aggression is the one area of expression expected and approved of in the male. In reality, it turns out to be just another taboo area, close quote. Herb Goldberg, The Hazards of Being Male, Surviving the Myth of Masculine Privilege. The heroic journey. Across a dusty plain rides Bruce the Barbarian. Like the kung fu star Bruce Lee, he is a hero of the ages, a masculine icon with many names. Conan, Tarzan, Rambo, and Captain Kirk are all names by which we know him. Note, after wrestling with the feminist complaints about the language being sexist because it defaults to the masculine gender, I decided that what makes the most sense was for the person speaking to default to his or her own gender. So I default to the male. Continuing. Different names, but the essential man remains the same, brave, courageous, and bold. An independent and lonely man who is reluctant but willing to fight. Often popular action adventures portray him as a common man, and the plot is well known. From the ordinary world, a reluctant hero is called by reasons both compelling and fearsome to fight against all odds. A wise mentor befriends him and helps him to accept his call to duty, but the rules are unknown and defeat seems certain. Nevertheless, in the darkest hour when all seems lost, he finds strength to carry on the struggle toward his first victory. Then, ultimately, he triumphs over the greatest challenge and returns home a transformed man. Regardless of what form the heroic journey takes, however, a kind of innocence characterizes its beginning, and innocence lost. And it often is in real life when adversity strips away all his happy illusions to unveil the determined underdog within. The heroic rapist. In some measure, most of us make this heroic journey, but during the past 2 decades, that would be the past 4 decades now, as the feminists intensified their assault on men, we have become so obsessed with masculinity's most extreme and violent characteristics. Quote, as in Victorian England, when suppression of sex led to an efflorescence of lurid flowers in the secret gardens of society, so the denial of male nature in modern life warps and perverts the natural play of male aggression, leading to a society that at once denies the existence of natural male aggressiveness and is utterly preoccupied with it. Close quote. George Gilder, Men and Marriage. The recent rape convictions, this is 1992, of 2 former heavyweight fighters should be no surprise. In extreme form, they represent the transformation of Bruce the Barbarian into heroic rapists. The cutthroat take-no-prisoners tycoons, the hypersexual amoral abusers of women, the Frankenstein's monsters whom their feminist co-creators seldom understand but fearfully condemn. Quote, in the current political situation, terrorism is a built-in consequence, a logical outcome of the male ideology with its focus on hierarchy, sheer height, women, and love. Note, as part of their attacks on men, second-wave feminists recast masculinity not as an expression of our nature, but as an ideology, which gave them license with the mainstream to sidestep accusations of sexism, bigotry, and misandry. To Haidt's accusation, I reply, hierarchies of men or the sex of women. Heroes are men whose efforts, violent or otherwise, benefit women. The myth machines flash heroic images of male violence onto the big screen of cinema and the little screens of television. Urban myths confirmed by the hordes of groupies who reward apparently violent men such as football stars, boxers, and professional wrestlers with sex. That's a powerful inducement to behave aggressively for men starved for sexual attention by women who trade sex for power. Quote, until recently, we have objectified men more subtly by bribing them. We told men that if they killed themselves, we'd call them heroes. Close quote. Warren Farrell, Why Men Are the Way They Are. Tortured hypermasculinity, however, is not the true nature of male aggressivity, nor is aggression its built-in consequence. A false association. Commonly, feminists associate aggressivity with violence, and that is how society most frequently characterizes masculinity today. But there's another side to it. The essential characteristic of aggressivity feminists ignore that my dictionary defines as, quote, vigorously energetic, especially in the use of initiative and forcefulness, boldly assertive, close quote. Random House Webster's College Dictionary. Secreting roughly 20 times the testosterone women do, men tend to be boldly assertive and virile. Most men love invigorating challenges, but feminists equate this with violence. Ironically, they gloss over or ignore female violence. Female violence ignored. Though many women may scorn the aggressive acts of some men and denigrate all men for them, are they truly less violent than men? Deborah Tannen suggests women are just as aggressive as men, but express it differently. Quote, if boys and men often use opposition to establish connections, competition, jostling around, girls and women can use apparent cooperation and affiliation to be competitive and critical, close quote. Deborah Tannen, you just don't understand. Men may sometimes resort to violence, often to strong language, and every day to sometimes loud disagreement, but most women are expert at the smiling cut. Quote, a common way of hurting someone without seeming to intend to is to repeat a critical remark made by someone else, close quote. Deborah Tannen, you just don't understand. In the world of men, there is a context woven broad and of rough fabric, as different in texture as it is in scope from the embroidered cloth of women's lives. Women weave their world upon a subjective loom, wherein they define all in terms of self in relation to others. Here there is neither justice nor a hierarchy of rights, but only competing interests. Portrayed upon this canvas, men frequently seem more violent, but only because they tend to be more overt, objective, and outspoken. Feminists play upon this to systematically gain control of men by making overt aggressivity a shameful thing. By framing all men as pseudo-aggressors, they have promoted the notion that male passion and men's raised voices are indicators only of an anger that signals violence. They don't understand, or want us to not understand, that men often behave thus because it is our nature to be passionate and sometimes loud without ever being violent. But with all the romance novels, movies, and television dramas about heroic rapists, and with all the newspaper and magazine articles about the relatively few violent men, it's understandable how women could confuse assertive or aggressive masculinity with feminine hostility. Feminazis. 2012, Olympia, Washington. I wrote the chapter above before Catherine A. McKinnon wrote Only Words, a book, in which she used the most lurid examples to equate male speech with actual physical violence. Today, women who have never heard of McKinnon have no idea who she is, embrace the idea of equating male words with acts of male violence. They turn even softly spoken words expressing opposition to all sexism and all double standards with physical violence, escalate it into an accusation of violence which they use to blame and shame to control men. All this while women are cheered as strong and powerful for speaking far more violently. This is not theoretical. Millions of men experience it every day. It's real, it's sexist, it's intolerant of genuine masculinity. From a feminist perspective, the purpose is to oppress men, and we should call it for what it is, evil. 2015, Olympia, Washington. That would be today. Although by the 1990s I was in every essential way consciously MGTOW, even by 2012 I still supported the men's rights movement as the most effective means to oppose feminism. It was one of Karen Strawn's videos that encouraged me to take the public stand of an anti-feminist. But it was the attacks of the progressives infesting a voice for manginas, or a voice for men. Thanks, Bern. Including at least one of Karen's fellow honey badgers, that permanently turned me off from the men's rights movement. At that point, I began to see that any rights movement, put that in scare quotes, will attract progressives who will subvert it with identity politics, and those invariably devolve into big government programs that, having watched several of his videos now, I think Turd Flinging Monkey has amply demonstrated lead to gynocentrism and feminism. While I understand that many MGTOW would rather stay away from politics, and having been a politician who, after 10 very frustrating years, oh, I deleted. Well, that's weird. Resigned all of my political positions so I could report on the sometimes despicable behavior of the other legislators. I very much sympathize. But because the feminists and other cultural Marxists use politics against us, for us to ignore politics would be like the Jews in Weimar Republic ignoring the ascent of Adolf Hitler. In that analogy, male feminists, most of whom are progressive neoliberals on the left, would be like Jews in the Weimar Republic actually voting for and applauding Hitler. Now, most men today are vaguely aware that something is wrong. MRAs know something is wrong and think that if we respond like Martin Luther King Jr. to the injustice, that sympathy and shame will set us free. MGTOW, on the other hand, know what's wrong. All of us are responding by going galt in varying degrees, and for some that includes divorcing themselves from the political process. Well, Bern Chapin of Chapin's Inferno, a wandering cauldron of politically incorrect commentary, has thoroughly explained the need for political action. For those of you who choose to divorce yourself from politics, I encourage you to follow Doug Casey and Simon Black into establishing residency in at least one other country and obtaining at least one passport from a country other than your country of origin, your country of citizenship. In fact, I think we should all do that. You can be sure that when the feathers hit the fan in Nazi Germany, there were millions of Jews who discovered too late the value of having a plan B. Below I link to a couple of Turd Flinging Monkey's videos in which he discusses the traditionalism cycle, which is, in my ever so humble opinion, a superior analysis of what in my 1991 book I called the cycle of sexism. Both the chapter and the video are linked below. In his videos, Turd Flinging Monkey invited us to work on a solution to the inevitable devolution of prosperous patriarchy into impoverished feminism. It's a hard assignment, but one I suspect must include political action. More about that in a future video. That's all for now. Check out the other videos. Subscribe to the channel. For the Backlash at Backlash.com, my name is Rod Van Mecklin.